Hi guys, TotallyDubbed here, and today I'm doing a video review on the Acer Predator X27. Now this monitor, not the one over here, is a 4K HDR monitor that runs at 144 Hz and has an IPS quantum dot display. Now before you jump your guns and be like, oh my god, that's the best thing ever, it comes in at £2,100, and yes, you heard that right. In the US, it can be found for around $2,000, and its competitor, which essentially uses almost the same panel, is the Acer's PG27UQ, can be found for £2,300 and $1,900 respectively. Now in this review, unfortunately I cannot compare it to the Asus, but what I will be giving you is my honest thoughts and opinions of this Acer monitor. Not only from a gamer's point of view, but also in terms of an editing point of view, color accuracy, the whole shebang will be found in this video. So I apologize for the length of this video, but if you want an in-depth video from an unbiased, unpaid reviewer, and you want one that comes from a guy that's reviewed over 110 different monitors, then you might as well stay tuned. So now, without further ado, let's go into the build quality. Now in terms of build quality, this monitor is pretty unique and kind of reminds you of a professional grade monitor. The reason why is because of these panels. Now these panels are there to serve a sort of purpose. It's for you to not be distracted by your surroundings, more to be concentrated on the monitor, and also to get a good, and not so get any sort of reflection on the monitor. So very much sort of like a pro grade attitude that Acer have over here. These can of course be removed. You have to unscrew these, and this one just props open. You've also got a little a cap over here which allows you to pop in, like, let's say, a display calibrator and calibrate your display. Now the monitor itself has pretty basic adjustments. You can swivel it, and you've got a height adjustment, and of course you've got tilt, which almost is a given. Now bear in mind that this won't tilt fully because of my my stand, but nevertheless, unfortunately there's no way that you can rotate it. In fairness, it's a gaming monitor, so I can't understand why anyone would want to rotate it, but nevertheless, you just don't have the capability. Now, in terms of the monitor stand, it's got a sort of triangular shaped stand. I'm not a massive fan of them. As you can see on my IKEA Freddy desk, it barely sits correctly on the stand. It is fantastically sturdy. However, it's not the best of stands in the world in terms of its design. However, it does hold the monitor very sturdily. I've had no sort of wobble or anything like that on the monitor. Now underneath the monitor, you'll see a sort of RGB strip which you can customize through the OSD, which I'll show you in just a bit. Around the back of the monitor, hopefully I can just adjust it, there you go, you'll see a joystick and a few buttons which you can use. And then there is a little vent at the back over here, which is where it comprises its fan. Now you might be wondering, why on earth is there a fan? Well, I'll get into that, and that's something I definitely want to touch upon because most reviewers seem to miss that and consumers seem to be complaining about it. It's a little fan that cools down the panel because the panel gets so hot and gets so bright. It is a HDR display after all and gets up to around 1000 nits. It needs to cool it down somehow, and that little fan has been used by Asus and even Acer on the X27 in order to cool down the panel. Now on the left hand side you've got two USB 3.0 ports. In terms of inputs, you've got DisplayPort 1.4 and HDMI 2.0. I would have liked to have a little bit more inputs. For example, I know you're not going to be using 144 Hz with a console. I know we're #PC Master Race, but nevertheless it would have been nice to have a few different inputs, because if you have a console or let's say a Blu-ray player or something like that and you wanted to use that, unfortunately you would not be able to because you're only limited to two inputs, and DisplayPort is probably the input that you're going to use with your PC. Other than that, there's a little handle in case you want to carry across a £2,000 monitor on your commutes. It's always useful to have. So now let's talk about the OSD. So accessing it via the joystick, you can see you've got two buttons over here which you can customize. I've set it to overdrive and peak brightness, and then you've got the input. If you click again, you'll get into the menu. Now within the menu you've got a variety of different options, and some of these options become disabled depending on what settings you use. For example, if I were to launch Destiny 2 and run it at with HDR, you'll see that most of these options will be grayed out. Now the peak brightness is absolutely incredible. You can get up to 500 nits even on SDR. It's absolutely crazy in terms of how bright it gets, but especially in HDR, and I'll show you that in the image quality section. But nevertheless, you've got all variety of options: blue light, dark boost, backlight response, SDR variable backlight. Now that's quite important, and I'll get into it in just a bit as well. But you'll probably want to have it enabled if you are running it in Windows. But just bear that in mind, that's an option. Color options, I think out the box it looked really nice on user or even on the warm on settings. You can also adjust it to the sRGB, YCBCR or sRGB to DisplayPort and HDMI. I suggest using them all off unless you're a color editor or video editor or something like that. You'll probably want to have them on. SDR colors, sRGB, again, if you're going to be editing an sRGB color on the color gamut, it might be useful to you. You can adjust the gamma as well, so you can add certain amounts or take away as it shows. In terms of audio, it's got built-in speakers. Just as if with any monitor that I've come across, it's pretty poor, but it'll give you enough for Windows notifications. I'm presuming if you're going to buy a £2,000 monitor, you're not going to have, you're not going to cheap out on speakers. At least I hope not. Now this monitor comes default at a 120 Hz refresh rate, but it's factory overclocked via the OSD. As you can see over here, you'll have to enable that, put that 144 Hz and enable that. That'll turn on and off the monitor, and then you'll have the max refresh rate, which is 144 Hz. You can have an aim point, which is like a center reticule if you ever want that. I've never understood why anyone wants that. You can have a refresh rate number, which is quite useful, and then set the OSD, and within the system you can adjust those hotkeys, and also the ambient light, which you can completely enable or disable, and also change the sort of style. So for example, having it on certain colors, or having it in like a rainbow effect, and even having it a fixed, or let's say a breathing, flashing, or whatever have you, a sort of motion. So the one I like usually is water wave, and I think it is on rainbow as well. That's my favorite, and the brightness as well can be adjusted. So these are all, it's not like quite like the Philips Hue, but it adds a little bit of ambiance, let's say, to the monitor. It's not enough to provide enough backlight, but it's nice to have, I guess. That's about it. So that's the OSD. So now you're wondering why you can see me. Well, it's simply because I want to talk about that fan. And I've got a little bit of short little clips, and without further ado, let me just play them. So in that clip, you could hear me unplugging the monitor, literally yanking out the jack, and then the fan powers down. The reason I did that is so that you can understand how quiet my room is, or how quiet my setup is without that fan in the background. And now let's go to the fan at full pelt after playing quite a lot of Destiny 2 in HDR. And so now you've heard the fan at its peak. It is very loud, and in all honesty, when I first got the X27, I actually sent it back to Acer because I felt there was a fault with it. It actually so happened to be that the version I initially got was a first revision where the rear fan was blocked by a solid plastic, which makes no sense because a fan needs to breathe, and therefore it would constantly be running. What I found with the second revision, the one that had like little grills, as you saw in the back, is that the fan is very quiet or essentially off when you're browsing the desktop or just playing a light game. But then as soon as you start playing HDR content or start using the monitor for prolonged amounts of usage, so for example playing 4 hours of Destiny 2 straight, and I know it's probably not good for my health, but that's what happens, then I heard that fan going at full pelt. So you have to bear in mind that this fan does come on in order to cool the panel. So the fan is a major talking point for me. I'm going to bring it back up in my conclusion, but I just wanted to mention it and actually showcase it for you guys so you guys can actually hear it and see it in a real world scenario. And I must say, Acer have improved from the initial revision, and I'm glad they're actually listening to feedback, but I still don't think they're quite there with it. So image quality is very important, so of course we're going to talk about that. Now, before getting into it, I just want to talk about Chroma subsampling. Now, TFT Central go in great depth, and you can see the fantastic review of the Asus monitor, so it's a bit different, but the same principle applies for the Acer X27. Essentially, you're not going to get the full color spectrum if you're running at 4K 144 Hz. However, if you drop it down to 120 Hz or 98 Hz, then you're going to get a better Chroma subsampling. In all honesty, if you want the best of both worlds, 120 Hz 4K is probably your best bet. But nevertheless, of course, we're reviewing a 144 Hz monitor. This is something that might only concern people who are going to be browsing the web or looking at text quite a lot, and or people who are going to be color editing or photo editing. So just bear this in mind, because I'm going to be basing all my tests on the 144 Hz refresh rate and my overall experiences at that, and how the gamma shifts at 144 Hz, or if it doesn't. All of that. Essentially, all I'm just trying to say over here is that be sure to check TFT Central's review on that, and more so, it's important for you guys to know, and it's very complicated to explain in a short segment in a video. Now with that aside, I put it through a calibrator. Now you'll be able to see, hopefully, in terms of the figures, it hits 96% of the sRGB color gamut, and that is obviously calibrated to the sRGB color space. In other words, it was running in sRGB mode in order to hit that percentage. In terms of its color accuracy, it hits a staggering 0.9 average delta E, and it gets a respectable contrast ratio of 1062 to 1, and a peak brightness of around 470 nits. Now what does that mean is that the monitor is ridiculously color accurate, and the fact that the monitor gets to a decent level of brightness in SDR. Now, you might be wondering, why am I saying SDR and not HDR? Simply put, because HDR gets to a much greater level. Only problem I have, however, is that I can't test the HDR color accuracy, because the program I run, DisplayCal, only runs in SDR, and the monitor and Windows will only pick it up in SDR, as in properly. So, in order to test this, all I did is I put a calibrator to the screen with a separate laptop in order to measure its peak luminance of around 1000 nits. I say around because it's sometimes a little bit hit and miss, and you can see my calibrator's pretty beaten up, so it can vary at times. All I'm trying to say over here is that in HDR you're going to get up to 1000 nits, which is absolutely blinding. Put it into perspective, most monitors get to around 270 to 400 nits, so for a monitor to be hitting around 500 nits in SDR and 1000 nits in HDR is absolutely incredible. Now, does that matter? Well, yes, because HDR images are going to look a lot better, you're going to get much more vivid scenes, and depending on how you use the monitor in terms of what you're going to be outputting, you're going to be enjoying the scene a lot better than your monitor that's going to hit a lot lower figures. Now, in terms of the color accuracy, I must say I'm very impressed. In terms of how it hits the overall color gamut, it's also impressive. I did talk about the SDR variable before, and what you'll see now is just a little the profile. You can see the profile is quite big there, and then when I had it running on the sRGB mode, you can see it's quite small. So in order to hit a larger color gamut, you can run it on the SDR variable mode, and you can switch it on, as in the local dimming mode, and then you'll hit almost 99% of the sRGB, Adobe RGB, and 90% of the DCI-P3 color gamuts, which is incredible. So this monitor is actually very impressive when it comes to color accuracy and out-the-box calibration. so you don't have to really faff around too much about it. Now there's also brightness uniformity, which is something I test in more ultra-wide monitors or more professional grade monitors, but in this respect I'm looking at a gaming monitor, but given its price tag, it's always something important to see. Now the monitor does relatively well across the board. For a £2,000 monitor, it should be doing a lot better, but given it's a gaming monitor, the numbers that you get over here are perfectly acceptable, to the point that you have not sort of massive extremities and the display uniformity is pretty good. Therefore, if you're color editing, video editing, or whatever have you, no matter where you snap the things, like to your left, right, or center, or whatever it might be, you're going to get a relatively uniform picture. And I know you're going to be saying, why are we looking at this guy again? I want to look at the monitor. Now, there's a reason why. It's because I want to talk about the haloing sort of blooming effect. Now, with the SDR variable backlight and local dimming enabled, what you'll notice is when you're moving the mouse on a black background, you get a sort of haloing effect. And you can see over here that I'm sort of demonstrating, and I've got certain pictures as well that I try to take in order to demonstrate it. It's something that you notice on TVs, and it's something that I've noticed with this monitor. Is it something to be concerned about? Well, it depends. If you're going to be using the local dimming feature, which I highly suggest simply because it really darkens those blacks to pitch black blacks, as in like it's incredible how that local dimming actually works, then you'll get the best sort of experience. But then just bear in mind that if you're going to have a white object in front of a black object in any sort of way, or if you're going to see watching a film, for example, then you're going to notice that sort of like haloing, blooming sort of effect. Again, specifically on SDR. If you go on HDR, however, you don't have that problem as much. It is slightly noticeable, but it's not something to be overly concerned about. Backlight bleed is also something I always get asked about, especially when it comes to an IPS panel. I'm pleased to say that the backlight bleed is minimal. You'll be able to see in these pictures that I tried to sort of capture it. It's very minimal. Acer have done a fantastic job in this respect. Again, that is also due to the fact that you've got a full array local dimming. In other words, you've got LEDs all over, which are capable of switching independently on and off, and therefore you don't get that much of like a light bleed, which you usually get from edge lit monitors that comes from the side, or like a TV of sorts. So in terms of that, nothing else to report. So overall, what do I think about the image quality? Well, in all honesty, I think Acer have done a fantastic job over here. It looks beautiful. Out the box, it doesn't really need calibration. Of course, calibration will aid it in order to get that perfect sort of color accuracy. But out the box, for normal consumers who don't want to spend money on a calibrator or calibrating software, it looks beautiful. As you can see potentially in the corner, this picture of the Taj Mahal, one that I took, contrast ratio is fantastic. And something I should also mention about contrast ratio is that the figure I got, which was 1000 odd to 1, goes up to around 6000 odd to 1, depending on the modes that you select, so just bear that in mind. In terms of color accuracy, as you were able to see before, under 1.0 of average delta is absolutely insane, especially for a gaming monitor. And viewing angles are fantastic, which is something I didn't cover, but given it's an IPS monitor, viewing angles are fantastic. You've got very little backlight bleed, if any, and just generally, when you look at the monitor, you'll be in awe. You'll really love it. And coming from my Acer XF27 which is an IPS panel, I could really see the difference over here, specifically because the full array of local dimming, so FALD as they say, it just looks incredible. The deep blacks that you get, the really nice white point, incredible. Kind of mind blown for a gaming monitor. Now let's get into the business end. In my opinion, it's the gaming performance. So right now I've just got Counter-Strike just running there in the background just for a beautiful wallpaper, let's say. And don't worry, I'm against bots, so I'm not one of those trolls. But nevertheless, all I'm going to say over here is I'm going to cover two aspects: the competitive side of it and the casual gamer side of it. Now, most people don't cover both simply because they don't play both, and or they don't really know what competitive gaming is. I don't mean to sound boastful about that, but I've played a lot of Counter-Strike, sworn at a lot of people online because they can't smoke mid. But I play Counter-Strike almost on a daily basis, and over the last couple of years I've really gotten used to playing at a really high level. What I need from a monitor, therefore, is it to respond really well and have very low input lag. And of course, the high refresh rate does make a difference. So 144 Hz is great because I get a nice, buttery smooth experience with 144 Hz. The input lag, however, on this monitor is decent. It's not amazing, it won't compete with a 144 Hz TN panel, and actually neither does it compare even with my XF270 HU. That monitor, Acer's previous model, which I said the 144 Hz 1440p model, has about the eighth of the input lag than this X27 does. But that is a ridiculously good monitor in terms of its input lag. It's among one of the best in the world. In this respect, for its input lag, it's decent. The X27 does a decent job. However, when it comes to response time, I was a little bit disappointed. Now, there's a few reasons behind this. First of all, we're going to talk about ghosting. And ghosting is when you get sort of a purple trail occurring in the background. What I found is that when I set the overdrive to extreme, I got the best response time of the monitor. However, at that cost, I got massive amount of purple trail at the back. And that really distracted from the overall experience. Even for a game like Counter-Strike, which is not a visually appealing game, no matter what skins you have, for example, like my M4 right there, it just isn't a visually appealing game. So even in a game like that, I noticed the purple trail, which kind of took away from the experience. So then I had to dial it down to normal overdrive, and that's one step above off, and there I got a relatively okay blend. But was that enough for me to play competitively? I mean, I couldn't even play casual deathmatch with this monitor, let alone when it came competitive gaming. I would absolutely suck. And it's not to do with my GPU, which is GTX 1080, it's not to do with the resolution, because I normally play with an odd resolution on Counter-Strike with a 4:3 stretched resolution. It's just simply because the monitor hasn't got the best response time in the world. Now, it's not to say it's bad, far from it. It's just that if you're going to be competitively gaming, and when I mean competitive gaming, I don't mean playing Hearthstone or Dota 2, I mean playing an FPS game like Counter-Strike, then you're going to be disappointed. It's not made for competitive gamers, so I'm sorry you guys, even though it's a £2,000 monitor, it's not made for competitive gamers, so I wouldn't pick it for that. For casual gaming, however, for example, and I don't think Dota could be considered casual when it's one of the biggest esports games, but what I mean by that is that you're not going to need the fastest response time or the fastest input lag when it comes to a monitor playing an MMORPG, an RTS game, a MOBA, or whatever game it might be, but those type of games will not need the fastest response time. And so, for example, in my test, I had Destiny 2, which is a game that uses HDR, and it's a game that, you know, if you miss the enemy by a little bit or you're a little bit slow to respond, it's not going to be the end of the world. Of course, it's a first-person shooter, role-playing, action-adventure type of game, but even then, it's not the one where every single pixel matters like Counter-Strike. In this respect, for casual gaming, the X27 was perfectly adequate. I had no sort of problems with it and was very much content, especially with HDR enabled. I suddenly got beautiful colors on Destiny 2, and unlike looking at potato graphics on Counter-Strike, I had beautiful scenery, aliens running at me and often killing me, and me looking at into the horizon and looking at a beautiful skyline. Games like that really benefit from a monitor like this, and specifically in 4K, and specifically if you can run 4K with your graphics card, and I would suggest a GTX 1080 or above. In all honesty, I'd SLI two 1080s or 1080 Ti's in order to get the best sort of performance in order to drive 144 Hz at 4K, which to get most of the monitor you will need graphics power in order to do that. So bear that in mind, that if you're a casual gamer looking for a fantastic monitor, then absolutely you'll get that, but you're going to have to spend an arm and a leg not only on the monitor but also on your graphics card and also your CPU in order not to bottleneck that performance. Now, before ending the gaming section, it is very important that I actually talk about NVIDIA G-Sync. Almost forgot it because you don't even notice it, because it's actually that good, so to speak. G-Sync reduces screen tearing, and G-Sync 2 is NVIDIA's response of HDR and almost AMD FreeSync 2. In other words, you're going to get buttery smooth experience, and given G-Sync basically locks the frame rate of the monitor with your GPU, you're going to get no screen tearing. G-Sync's been out there for a while, and it's great to see it included in the X27, but almost it's no surprise given the fact that NVIDIA are one of the biggest or the biggest GPU manufacturer, and the fact that we're paying over £2,000 here, so you kind of expect the best that you can get, and in this respect, you're going to get NVIDIA G-Sync. And now you're back to seeing me, and because we're at the end of the video. It's my verdict, my conclusion, my overall thoughts and opinion. In all honesty, this monitor is a bit of a mixed bag to me. It's a very expensive monitor, and therefore if it's a very expensive monitor, actually the most expensive gaming monitor I've ever come across, I say gaming because professional monitors get way above that sort of price range. As for a gaming monitor, it has to really be almost perfect in almost every respect. If someone's spending £2,000 on a monitor, and that's pretty much more expensive than my entire PC build, I'd want it to be absolutely perfect. Unfortunately, the X27 and even the Asus monitor, so I'm not slagging Acer, but Asus as well, the monitor isn't perfect, and there's a variety of reasons behind that, from the haloing effect, to the non-competitive gaming element of it, to the fan noise, to the limited sort of inputs that you get. There's all different type of reasons that I can pick out of why I wouldn't buy this monitor. So if you gave me £2,000, would I buy this monitor? Absolutely not. I just wouldn't buy it, because I'm a competitive gamer and I love great color reproduction, but I rate gaming performance more than anything. And of course, for £2,000, I'd rather upgrade my BMW M3 than spend it on a monitor. And that's my personal opinion. However, if you are someone who's a casual gamer and wants the best 4K gaming experience, then without a shadow of a doubt, this Acer X27 is the best monitor you can buy. And I'm not just saying that, it genuinely is, but you need to have that budget. Personally, even if you're a casual gamer, I would suggest Acer's XF270HUA, which is a newer version of my monitor, because it's got the perfect blend. You've got 1440p, which in all honesty is more than adequate for most cases. You've got an IPS panel, and you've got 144Hz refresh rate with class-leading input lag and response time, even though it's an IPS panel. So I'm a little bit in a catch-22. Would I buy it if I want 4K? Well, yeah, but why do I want 4K? So that's probably what you have to ask yourselves. If you were thinking about buying this monitor, why were you thinking about buying it? Were you thinking about buying it because it's the most expensive monitor you saw in the shop? Is it because the advertising makes it seem as it's the best gaming monitor ever made, or other paid or unbiased reviewers will tell you? Or is it because you wanted the best 4K monitor money can buy? And if it's for that last reason, then you're absolutely right in thinking this is the best 4K gaming monitor money can buy. If, however, you're like me and you think no one realistically can drive 144Hz at 4K on average or as a minimum FPS with a supercomputer, or someone who wants competitive gaming, and or someone who expects a near flawless execution from a panel or a manufacturer like Acer, then you'll be like me, and you'll think to yourself, I'd rather spend that money somewhere else, or I'd rather buy NVIDIA's latest graphics card and get a 1440p 144Hz or ultra-wide gaming monitor if I'm a casual gamer. So that's pretty much it. That's my conclusions, my honest opinion about it. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's a good gaming monitor. I like what Acer have done. I just think it's not rushed, but I feel that they need a little bit longer. So that's pretty much it, guys. Hopefully you enjoy this review, and if you have, make sure you give it a like, comment, subscribe, favorite, share, all that good stuff, whatever it might be. I've been Totally Dubbed. Hopefully you enjoy this review. Take care, and bye bye.